Of haggling, controversy and eventually unrest, reputed Shah Posse leader Christopher Dudus is now in the custody of United States law enforcement officials. A Lear jet with a man called the President took off shortly after 2 this afternoon as police and soldiers fanned out across the airport. Dwayne Burbick begins CVM's coverage of the high-profile extradition.
Our news team got to Norman Manley at around 12:30 Thursday afternoon. We checked in at the Jamaica Defence Force air wing where there were telltale signs of a major operation by the security forces. I'm here just outside the JDF air wing at the Norman Manley International Airport, where Christopher Dudus is expected to take his final flight to the United States to face gun and drug running charges. Now we understand that a JDF helicopter will bring him to this location and a federal aircraft is expected to take him on that final flight. We kept a watchful eye on the air wing as the minutes ticked on, and from our waiting area, we observed a convoy of police vehicles moving in on the location sometime before 1. Law enforcement officers emerged and quickly huddled into a meeting with U.S. Marshals who were already in waiting. A last-minute run-over of the protocol perhaps ahead of Coke's arrival. We continued to watch, but we were soon disturbed by the elements: rain, the police, and airport officials. The sound of a helicopter pierced the air at around 1:35. Our cue that Christopher Coke had arrived. We fought against the elements to get a glimpse of the alleged drug lord. He was, however, heavily guarded by JDF soldiers and other members of the security forces as he emerged from the JDF helicopter. He was taken from the helicopter into a room at the air wing. We waited some more, determined to get another glimpse of Coke. He emerged minutes later, but so did the security forces, forming a moving barricade around him. This time around, he was taken into the smaller of 2 aircraft on the grounds of the air wing. At approximately 2, the aircraft taxied out to the runway. Coke was on his way to face gun and drug running charges in New York. The soldiers, their job now done, went at ease. The police vehicles began filing out of the airport. A helicopter lingered, and so did our news team, until this: the aircraft airborne, the final proof of Coke's final flight. Dwayne Burbick, CVM News.
Now, just hours earlier, Coke decided to waive his right to a formal extradition hearing in Jamaica as he faced a resident magistrate at the Mobile Reserve. In a moment, we'll report on what happened outside the Mobile Reserve, but first, Andrew Cannon reports on what the former Tivoli Garden strongman said in a statement.
It's a noteworthy contrast. An extradition request wrought with delays and political entanglement that raged for 9 months came to an end by way of an uneventful court proceeding that lasted just under an hour. After sophisticated checks that included the use of metal detectors, journalists entered the room at the Mobile Reserve that was the designated venue for the hearing. Then the entry, amid much whispering and stares. A rather short, stocky figure going bald in the middle of the head in a short-sleeved blue striped shirt, jeans pants and brown shoes. The movement was somewhat quiet, not hastened. Then he turned and nodded to the reporters, and with that the man dubbed by the U.S. authorities as one of the world's most dangerous drug kingpins took his seat. Labelled the president of Tivoli Gardens, Coke may have presided over many affairs in West Kingston, but Thursday he had to respect a higher authority who was in charge of the proceedings, Resident Magistrate Georgiana Fraser. Now, it was a rather efficient hearing that took place at the ISCF building. Now, Christopher Coke, he sat directly in front of the journalists, and his gaze never left that of the resident magistrate. Now, just ahead of him was the Director of Public Prosecutions. It was she who raised the issue of attorney for Mr. Coke, because his attorney was not present in the room at the time. According to Mr. Coke, his attorney would arrive shortly, and as soon as he said that, George Suter entered the room. However, somebody was behind him. Tom Tavares Finson. So no Don Foote, the man who has been the mouthpiece for Coke's defense in recent weeks, but on hand was Tom Tavares Finson, the government senator who had withdrawn from the case amidst a flurry of concerns about conflict of interest. As several fans buzzed overhead, reporters moved to a front row to jostle for space to confirm what was heard. Yes, Coke had in fact waived his right to a hearing as he claims, quote, "I have taken this decision of my own free will, and have done so even though I am of the belief that my case would have been successfully argued in the courts of Jamaica." The man said to be the main factor behind days of civil unrest that sparked a state of emergency further stated the decision is in the best interest of his family, Tivoli Gardens, and above all, Jamaica. Nevertheless, the magistrate inquired of the accused whether it was his choice not to have the hearing. Yes, ma'am, was Coke's response. He was calm and subdued throughout. So several consent forms were signed by Mr. Coke as Mr. Tavares Finson sat beside him and perused them. At the end, the attorney said his client wishes to express gratitude to the security forces for the respectful manner he was treated. The DPP hailed the expeditious nature of the hearing.
This is a very good and positive moment for Jamaica to show that due process is alive and well.
Now the general departs, not with his guards, but with the U.S. Marshals in charge. He said he will be vindicated and returned to his family. Given the evidence, will that be an incomparable enterprise? The U.S. courts will decide. So, a chapter has closed. Another will open when Coke lands on U.S. soil. Now, speculation is rife about what exactly will Coke tell the U.S. authorities. Already, there are arguments that there could be anxious moments in Jamaica when Coke tells his version of several events. Reporting for CVM News, I'm Andrew Cannon.
May 20. The day scores of white-clad Christopher Coke supporters from West Kingston staged a demonstration from Spanish Town Road to the country's parliament to protest against the extradition proceedings.
I Dudus feed my six big them on me. I don't go to no politician, I go to Dudus. Jesus dead for us, or we are dead for Dudus.
The mood was quite the opposite on the day of Coke's hearing. His supporters were noticeably absent. Many speculate that it was due primarily to the heightened security in the area. Instead, there were a few curious onlookers from a nearby apartment building, as well as from another property close to Mobile Reserve. With the exception of the unusually high media and police military presence, it was a routine day on Deanery Road. The nearby schools remained in session, and there was an easy flow of traffic. Persons, however, attending the hearing had to undergo thorough screenings by the police. From what we observed, no vehicle was spared, signs that the lawmen were taking the highest level of precaution. Coke's supporters have been describing him as a protector and provider, a view which was trumpeted during the May 20 demonstration.
All what Dudus do for we, when them go with him, who else are going to stand up for we?
The question now is, will anyone emerge to fill Coke's shoes, or is this the end of the dynasty of Dons in Tivoli Gardens? Meanwhile, the authorities will serve a restraining order freezing all the assets of Christopher Coke. The information was disclosed as Mr. Coke faced a resident magistrate.
And Mr. Coke arrived in the United States at an airport in suburban White Plains in New York hours after he left Jamaica. The U.S. Justice Department said in a statement this evening that Coke is expected to be arraigned in the Manhattan Federal Court tomorrow. The release said he's to face charges of conspiracy to distribute marijuana and cocaine and conspiracy to illegally traffic in firearms. Coke will be held at a maximum security federal detention facility in Lower Manhattan. Within 24 hours, Mr. Coke is expected to appear before a federal magistrate for his arraignment. University of Miami Professor David Rowe explained the legal processes Coke will encounter.
After his first appearance, he will then have to appear before a magistrate, a federal magistrate, for his arraignment and for formal reading to him of the indictment. By the time of the arraignment, he will have to make a determination as to selection of his counsel. He can either get a federal public defender, court-appointed attorney, or he can select privately to have an attorney who is a member of the federal bar represent him.
Mr. Coke has the option of striking a plea bargain with U.S. officials or contesting the over 40 charges that have been leveled against him.
If he decides to go for a plea bargain, he could be sentenced within 30 days, depending upon the terms of the plea bargain. A plea bargain can sometimes be worked out within 2 or 3 weeks of the initial plea of the arraignment.
If convicted on the narcotics charge, he faces a maximum sentence of life in prison and a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison, as well as a fine of up to $4 million. He faces a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison on the firearms trafficking charge and a fine of up to $250,000. Coke's extradition brings to an end the controversy over the extradition